Rahim was a seeker of enlightenment. From the very earliest age, his longing and yearning was for liberation, nirvana. So as soon as he was able, he set out to find someone who could teach him enlightenment. He traveled near and far, meeting many teachers along the way. He practiced their disciplines. He undertook their rituals. But they never brought him to that place of freedom that he so yearned for. But as was his practice, one day he came to a village and he asked the villagers, "Is there a teacher here? Is there anyone who is a master and can take me to enlightenment?" And the villagers said, "Oh, well, there's an old hermit who lives up on the mountain up here, and he's said to be a master of enlightenment." So Rahim made the arduous journey up the side of the mountain until he came to that place, a ledge, a little plateau, it seemed. And following a little path, he came to the very simple abode of the old hermit. Now, he'd learned the practices along the way, so he made his ablutions and obeisance to the seeming master. And he said, please, can you teach me enlightenment?" The old master said, "Well, maybe you can stick around a while and help me keep the path clear and help to tend the vegetables." And the young man who'd met this kind of situation before thought to himself, well, this is a little bit of a test. I'll just follow his instructions. So he did that, and the old hermit would tell him what to do, when to go and get kindling for the fire, and how to plant the seeds for the vegetables and so forth. And several months went by, and nothing was said. So Rahim got a little bit frustrated and anxious, and finally he got up the courage to ask the old man, when are you going to begin to teach me?" "Oh," said the old hermit, "I think we need some more kindling for the fire. It's getting a bit low." So it went on, and a few months passed again, and he was getting very anxious, Rahim, thinking, I've been here now for 8 months and there's nothing. Again, after very much agitation, he asked the master again, "Have you got some words of wisdom that will guide me?" And the old hermit said, "I think those cabbages are ready for plucking now." And so the months passed, and it came into years. And after a time, Rahim became accustomed, and he revered the old hermit. He loved his deep tranquility, his infinite patience, the silence that seemed to be around him. In fact, Rahim himself became more and more still, more and more silent, until finally he forgot why he was there, totally and completely forgetting about enlightenment or nirvana or whatever it was. But then one day, they were sitting around their little fire, as they did each evening after their evening meal. Rahim suddenly had a thought. And he said to the old man, Master, why was it you never taught me? And the old man said, oh. And he picked up his little slipper and he tapped Ramin on the head and he said, you mean this? And all of a sudden, Rahim knew that he knew. Well, Rahim left that place. He descended the mountain and he began a wandering life. He was a wise man, a sage, a teacher. And he did this for the rest of his days. And then there's another Rahim. And this Rahim, from the very earliest age, would always ask questions. He would ask questions about everything. Why was the ant falling up the floor? Why is the sky so high? Why does the wind blow? Unfortunately, he was blessed with having a wise, patient, and very loving grandfather. And his wise and loving grandfather would answer his questions patiently to the best of his ability. But as Rahim grew, the questions became more complex. They got deeper, until finally Rahim was asking the biggest questions of all. What is the purpose of life? What is life all about? What are the secrets of God? What is God? So finally, his loving grandfather said to him, Rahim, I can no longer answer your questions. You will have to go and seek a master who will be able to give you that which you so seek. So, taking leave of his grandfather and his parents, he went on his way to seek a master. And indeed he did. He found his master in a far distant land. But when he did, he approached the master and he said, will you teach me what is God? The master said, have you got a place to stay? Rahim said, I don't need a place to stay. I just want the answer to my question. Oh, said the master, go and find yourself a place to stay and come back and I'll answer your question. So Rahim went off to try to find somewhere to live. But the master lived in a very small village. There was no inn, there was no guest house, and everyone had large families, so no one had a spare bed for him to sleep in. So all he could do was attempt to build himself a hut. But he didn't know how. So he had to seek out a carpenter. And he sought out a carpenter and asked the carpenter how he should go about building a house and could he borrow his tools to do so. Well, as it happened, the carpenter was a kind man and not only gave him some basic instructions but also loaned him his tools so that he could build his house. But every time he put the walls up, they fell down, and when he put the roof on, it caved in. Until finally, he had a semblance of a house. It was small, but it had windows that opened and doors that opened, and it was very cozy. So he went off back to the master and he said, well, master, I've now got a place to stay. Would you answer my question? What is God? The master said, have you got a job? He said, I don't need a job. I've got a house. I want the answer to my question. Oh, said the master, well, go and get a job and then come back and I'll answer your question. So Rahim went off And as it so happened, the baker was looking for an apprentice. So he became an apprentice to the baker. Well, did he have to work hard? Getting up in the very early hours of the morning, carrying heavy sacks of flour, learning how to mold and knead and make the bread. But he began to enjoy it, this hard work. And not only that, he got to interact with the customers who came in, and he had the wonderful aromas of the breads and the buns and the cakes in his nostrils every day. So this went on for some time, and he was such a good worker that the baker made him his partner. So Rahim, taking a couple of loaves of freshly baked bread he'd made himself, he went off to the master and said, "Here is some bread for you that I made myself. I've got a job." He said, "I've got my house now, and I've got a job now. Will you teach me about God?" "Oh," said the master, "are you married?" "No," said Rahim, "I have no thought about being married. I've got a house, I've got a job. This is what you ask me to do. I don't need..." "Oh," said the master, "go off and get yourself married and then come back and I'll answer your question." So Rahim went off, and as it happened, there was a very comely maiden who used to come into the bakery every day, and he started to have a little interaction with her, and they went out for walks in the forest and held hands. Rahim discovered love. He'd never experienced anything like it in his life before. His heart swelling, his heart beating when he thought about her. And so, of course, in the natural course of events, he asked her to marry him, and she agreed. So they got married, and they went to live in his little house, and they were very happy. Rahim had never been so happy in all his life before. He did not know that there was such a thing as this wonderful love. So he went back to the master and he said, "Well, I've got a place to stay, and I've got a job, and now I've got a wife. Will you answer my question? You got children?" Somehow Rahim knew that was going to come. So he wasn't too surprised about it all. So he went off, and in due course of time had 2 beautiful children. Well, of course, then love took on another dimension for him. He did not imagine that life could be any more content. He had a house, a job, a beautiful wife and children, and this amazing love. So he went back to the master and he said, "Now I've got a place to stay, I've got a job, I've got a wife, and I've got 2 children. Will you answer my question?" "You're not yet ready," said the master. Rahim said, "Well, what more do you want me to do?" "You will know," said the master. Not long after, word came from Rahim's hometown that Rahim's beloved grandfather was dying. So he hastily returned to his home village, where his old and much loved grandfather languished in the moments before passing. They shared what had happened to Rahim, and the grandfather could see that Rahim had matured and grown wise. And so he peacefully took his last breath. But Rahim was bereft. He had never, ever experienced such sadness ever before. Going into the depths of that sadness, he thought that he would never, ever again be able to come back into that space where he knew love and contentment. But something happened to Rahim. In these moments, after the passing of his beloved, wise and loving grandfather, and he returned to his home. And then, of course, he went to his master, and his master said, "Now you have the answer to your question." In due time, the master, of course, passed away, and he had Rahim as his successor. Rahim was wise, compassionate, knowing, and when any young person came to him asking him, "Will you teach me about God?" he would say, "Do you have a place to live?" What is the question that arises from these two stories, seemingly so different? What is the question that arises for us out of these stories? And more importantly, what is the answer to that question that arises in us? Take yourself back to where it begins for you. And the question that arose in your heart, your soul, to bring about this yearning, this longing that impelled us on our quest. What is the question that arises out of these two stories? questions? As you can realize, if any one of you had answered this question or come up with a question in answer to this inquiry, it would be your mind. Where is your mind? So I've done a good job, I'll give myself a pat.